Hello everyone, I am Sajna Janardhanan, Faculty Biology, Silver Hills Public School, Calicut. Welcome back to a new video session of chapter Morphology of Flowering Plants of class 11. Morphology of Flowering Plants. In the previous video, we have discussed about some of the important parts of the plants such as root, stem and leaf that has been completed in the previous session. Now, let us start this session with a new topic that is about the flower. Flower. What is a flower? It is the reproductive unit in angiosperms. The term angiosperm itself indicates that is flowering plants. In flowering plants, the flowers are meant for sexual reproduction. So, in plants, sexual reproduction to take place, normally the reproductive organs are present in a particular part, reproductive unit, and this reproductive unit we call it as flower. So, basically the flower for an angiosperm plant, that is flowering plants, the flower is the reproductive unit which is meant for sexual reproduction. The reproductive organs are present in the flower. Now, a flower in a plant is present or it is arranged in a particular manner on a floral axis. So, this arrangement of flower on the floral axis is known as inflorescence. So, what is inflorescence? That is the arrangement of flowers on the floral axis. When a flower is present, how it is arranged, this is meant by inflorescence. There are two types of inflorescence. One is racemose inflorescence and the other one is cymose inflorescence. These two are two types of inflorescence, two ways of arrangement of flowers on a floral axis. So, let us learn about racemose inflorescence. What is racemose inflorescence? Main axis continues to grow. In this type of inflorescence, the flower arrangement, the flowers are arranged in such a manner, the main axis continues to grow from the basal part. The flowers are formed and at the tip part or terminal part of the plant will be with buds. So, such an arrangement is known as acropetal succession. That means flowers are born laterally in an acropetal manner or acropetal succession. Acropetal manner or acropetal succession means the main axis is growing, the flowers are formed from the basal part of the main axis. Simultaneously, the growing terminal part will be having the buds, it carry buds. So, this type of arrangement of flowers on a floral axis is known by the term racemose inflorescence. One more type is there which is known as cymose inflorescence. In cymose inflorescence, main axis is not continuously growing, that will terminate into a flower. So, the main axis will end up into a flower. So, when it end up into a flower, what is happening? That is, its growth becomes limited. Further, it is not growing. And in such a case, when the main axis is terminating into a flower, the rest of the flowers are born in a basipetal manner or basipetal succession. What is basipetal succession? That is, the main axis is terminating into a flower, then the next flowers are formed from the lateral part of the main axis. From the sides of the main axis, the next flowers are forming. So, always one axis while on its growth that will end up into a flower. From the sides of that, the new flowers are developing. In such cases, in such a case, what is happening? The older flower is the present in the center, the side, the flowers which are formed will be what? Young flowers. So, thus the main axis is terminating into a flower and the rest of the flowers are formed in a basipetal manner. That arrangement of flowers on a floral axis is known as cymose inflorescence. So, thus inflorescence are of two types, racemose inflorescence and cymose inflorescence. So, once again inflorescence, that is the arrangement of flowers on a floral axis, is known as inflorescence. This arrangement of flowers on a floral axis are of two types. One is racemose inflorescence, the other one is cymose inflorescence. You can see from the picture itself, the main axis is continuously growing and the flowers are borne on the basal part of that, and this way when the main axis continues to grow, flowers borne laterally, that is in an acropetal succession, is known as racemose inflorescence. One more type is there, that is cymose inflorescence, in which the main axis terminates into a flower. Main axis is further not growing, that is ending into a flower, so that the growth is limited. Flowers are borne in a basipetal succession. So, thus inflorescence is over two types, racemose and cymose. Next, based on the arrangement of reproductive organs on a flower, flower can be divided into two types. What are they? They are unisexual flower, bisexual flower. What is the difference between a unisexual flower and a bisexual flower? It is if only one sex organ with single sex organ is present in a flower, such flowers are known as unisexual flowers, because it must be present only one sex is present in it. It could be either male or female. Any one sex organ is present in a flower, such flowers we call them as unisexual flower. Can anyone give an example for a unisexual flower? Most of the kitchen garden must be having this. Example, papaya. Papaya. For learning about this, let us learn about bisexual flower also, which means male and female sex organs, both sex organs are present in a single flower. From the picture itself you will get the idea, that is single flower must be having both male and female reproductive organ together in a flower. Whenever in a flower both male and female sex organs are present in a single flower, we call it as bisexual flower. What is the picture given there? Hibiscus is the best example for which flower? Yes, bisexual flower. With you can see the sex organs, male sex organs as well as female sex organs are present. For that we must know what is a male sex organ, what is a female sex organ. In the coming part we are learning all these things. So, based on the arrangement of reproductive organs, male and female reproductive organs, the flower could be divided into two types, as unisexual flower and bisexual flower. Unisexual flower means, what is it? The flower with single sex organ. It could be either male or female. Only one sex organ is present in a flower. Example, papaya, cucurbita, all these are examples for unisexual flowers. Next is bisexual, means both male and female sex organs are present in a single flower. Both the reproductive organs together present in a single flower. Majority of the flowers are bisexual, such as hibiscus, rose, jasmine, in which both male and female reproductive organs are present. So, bisexual flowers, majority of the flowers are bisexual flowers. Next, the symmetry of the floral parts. Based on the symmetry of the flower can be divided into two types, actinomorphic, zygomorphic. Let us have a look. What is actinomorphic? What is zygomorphic? What is actinomorphic? If a flower is divided in any plane and if that can be divided into two equal radial halves, If you can divide a flower into two equal radial halves in any plane, then it is known as actinomorphic. Next, one more type is there which is known as zygomorphic. So, what is zygomorphic? In zygomorphic flowers, normally the flower itself is an irregular shape. Okay. And on top of that, if a flower can be divided into two equal halves, here also a flower can be divided into two equal halves, similar halves, but only in one particular plane. It cannot be divided in any plane. It can divide only in one plane. If it can divide only in one particular plane, that to two equal halves, then such a symmetry we call it as what type of symmetry? Zygomorphic symmetry, and the flower is known as zygomorphic flower. So, zygomorphic flower means it is a flower that can be divided into two similar halves only in one particular plane. So, there is a difference between the actinomorphic and zygomorphic flower, that is a flower can be divided into two equal radial halves, and if that is in any plane, it is known as actinomorphic, but if it can divide only in one single plane, it is known as zygomorphic. So, that is the symmetry of a flower. Next, now we are really going to learn about a flower, the parts of a flower, from where it is originating. So, you all have seen flowers, you all know flowers, different types of flowers, different colored flowers, small, large, petal, single petal, double petal, fused ones, free petals, many types of flowers, variety of flowers you must have seen. But have you ever noticed each part from where it is originating, or have you ever tried to learn about a flower? Let us learn about the flower, the important parts of the flower, from where it is originating. All these details can be learned today. So, flower. The flower, a flower has different parts which are known as floral parts. Before moving to floral parts, all the parts in a flower are originating from the stalk region. That is, a flower has to attach to the stem part. It is developing from the axillary bud, or it is developing from the terminal part of a stem. Anywhere when a flower is born, and that must be having a stalk or pedicel, that is in the attachment part. Just above the stalk or the pedicel, there will be a swollen region which we call it as thalamus or receptacle, from which the parts of the flower are originating. So, before moving to the parts of the flower, first let us learn. Think, whenever a flower is present on a plant, this flower is attached to the plant by a stalk part which we call it as pedicel. So, that is the attachment part. Just above the attachment part, there is a swollen region from where all the floral parts are arising, all the floral parts are originating. So, originating part is a swollen region, and this swollen region present on a flower, we call it as thalamus or receptacle. That is the region from where an arrow mark is given, from where all the parts of a flower are originating. So, the basal portion, a bulged swollen portion from where all the floral parts are originating, we call it as thalamus. Next, what are the floral parts? I was mentioning about the floral parts continuously. All the floral parts are originating from the swollen portion which we call it as thalamus and all. But let us know what are these floral parts. A flower must be having 4 floral parts, which are the important parts of a flower. What are the important parts of a flower? Let us have a look. What are they? First, calyx. Second, corolla. The third part is androecium. And the fourth part is gynoecium. These are the 4 important parts of a flower. So, a flower means it should have 4 important parts, which we generally say floral parts. So, these floral parts are mainly calyx, corolla, androecium gynoecium. Each part we have to study in detail. So, before moving to each part, let me explain one more thing about flower. Based on the position of the gynoecium, flower can be divided into three types such as hypogynous flower, perigynous flower, epigynous flower. Now, what is the position of what? Gynoecium. In a hypogynous flower, which I have written already, you know that it is hypogynous flower. What is happening? The gynoecium is the female reproductive part of a flower, which occupies the highest position, and the other parts, 4 floral parts I showed you. Which are the 4 floral parts? Once again I will show you: calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium. These are the 4 floral parts. In this, we are taking only the gynoecium. Rest of the 3 parts related with gynoecium, we have to see. We can learn or we can see 3 different types of flowers. In the first type, hypogynous flower, what is there? The gynoecium is present at the highest position. Gynoecium is seen at the top part, and all other parts are originating below the gynoecium, like calyx, corolla and androecium, that is the stamen, the male reproductive part. All are originating from the base of the gynoecium. Then we can say that here the gynoecium, the female reproductive organ part, which contains the ovary, which is superior ovary, that is, as it is present on the top part, it is known as superior ovary. In such a case, the flower is known as hypogynous flower. So, once again, hypogynous flower means all the 4 floral parts are present in a flower. Of this, the gynoecium is seen to be the highest position. Rest 3 floral parts are originating from the base part of the gynoecium or below the gynoecium. In such a case, the ovary seems to be superior. Ovary is on top. Rest all parts are originating below it. So, in such a case, when the ovary seems to be superior and the flower, rest of the parts are originating below it, then the flower is known as hypogynous flower. In hypogynous flower, ovary is superior, the gynoecium is occupying the highest position, all other parts. What are the all other parts? Calyx, corolla, stamen, that is the androecium. These parts are originating below it. In such a flower is known as hypogynous flower. So, hypogynous flower, the ovary is always present in the superior position. Gynoecium at its highest position means ovary is at the superior position. Same way, the second type, perigynous flower. Here, the gynoecium is situated at the center. It is not superior, it is not inferior. It is present at the center in the middle region, and all other parts are originating from the rim of the thalamus, that is the gynoecium center part. From that region itself, all other parts are originating. In such a case, what we can say is ovary is known as half inferior. It is not inferior, it is not superior. So, we can say ovary as half inferior. Such a flower is known as perigynous. So, what is the difference between hypogynous and perigynous? Hypogynous, gynoecium is present at the highest position, ovary is superior. Then only we call that flowers as hypogynous. Here in perigynous, gynoecium is situated at the center. All parts are originating from the rim of that. So, ovary seems to be half inferior. Flower is known as perigynous. This is the second type. Third, obviously, what could be the third? The gynoecium occupies the lowest position. The ovary is present inferior, lowest part. Rest, all floral parts are arising above the ovary. that is from the top portion, all the 3 parts are originating. Ovary is present as inferior, gynoecium occupies the lowest position, then the flower is known as epigynous. Thus, based on the position of gynoecium, a flower can be divided into 3 types such as hypogynous, perigynous, epigynous. Next, let us start with the 4 important parts of a flower. The first part, calyx. Anytime when you see a bud, now next time onwards, once after listening to this class, you all should go and see a flower. In a flower, the outermost whorl of a flower is, which we call it as sepals. That is a quite common word for you. Calyx is not very common, that is a biological term, but sepals you all know, which is generally green in color, which very clearly we can see for the bud. The buds are protected by a green cap-like structure, which we can call it as calyx. So, calyx is the outermost whorl of a flower, also called as sepals, which is green in color, and its main function is to protect the flower in the bud stage. So, all plants must be having a green colored part which is protecting the bud. So, this is the outermost whorl of a flower, simply we call it as sepals. Sepals are green in color and its function is to protect the flower in the bud stage. There are 2 types of sepal arrangement. If all the sepals are united and forms into a tubular structure as seen in the picture hibiscus and all, you can see the bud is enclosed inside a cap or fused structure of sepal, which we call it as gamosepalous. Gamosepalous means the sepals are united. United sepals are known as gamosepalous, and when the sepals are free, they are totally free, each one is separated, then such a condition we call it as polysepalous. So, the sepals, if they are united, it is known as gamosepalous, and if the sepals are free, it is known as polysepalous. So, that is all about the calyx, the first floral part of a flower. So, once again, outermost whorl of a flower called as sepal, which is generally green in color, protect the flower in the bud stage. When if they are fused, united, it is known as gamosepalous, and if the sepals are free, it is known as polysepalous. So, next is corolla. Let us start with corolla. What is corolla? The term may not be familiar for you, like calyx, corolla are the terms which are not familiar. Petal, that is quite common term, petal. What is petal? It is a bright colored part, that is the flower part which is attracting us, as well as that is why anytime when we see a flower, we remember rose, different colors of rose we remember, na? The rose shape or other things we may not notice, but the color. If you see sunflower, immediately the yellow flower, or if any teacher asks you for give an example for a yellow flower, give an example for a white flower, immediately it comes to you jasmine. What is coming? That is the color of the petal, isn't it? That is making us, or that is reminding us, that is what type, what color, what was the color of the flower, how it is. Any color flower, the colored part is, the brightly colored part is the petal. So, petals are brightly colored, and why these bright colors are there for petals? Petals are the part for attracting the insects for pollination. For a flower, the reproductive organs are present inside, which the reproduction when takes place, a pollination has to be conducted. The pollination is conducted by insects. For that to attract the insects, that is the corolla. So, corolla is petal which is brightly colored, which is attracting insects for pollination. Shape and color of the petals varies, and the main function for the petal is to attract insects for pollination. Not only insects, its main purpose is to attract anyone for pollination. Petals also are of two types. When the petals are united and they form a tubular structure, then such a petal we call it as gamopetalous. When the petals are free, such petals which we can detach each other like in hibiscus and all, single petals could be taken, then such petals we call it as polypetalous. So, that is all about corolla. Third part, before moving to the third part, let us see the arrangement of sepals and petals in a flower. A particular arrangement is seen for petals and sepals in a flower. This arrangement of sepals and petals in a floral bud or on a flower, we call it by the term aestivation. So, arrangement of sepals and petals on a flower is known as aestivation. The aestivation are of four types. They are valvate, twisted, imbricate, vexillary. So, what is aestivation? What is it? Yes, that is the arrangement of sepals and petals in a floral bud or in a flower. This arrangement is known as aestivation. It is of four types we have to study in detail, such as valvate, twisted, imbricate, vexillary. Let us learn each one. Valvate aestivation. Just have a look of the picture. Here, the sepals or petals, when they are arranged in a whorl, they never just touches one other at the margin. No overlapping is there. Either they are free or they just touch at the margin. If this way, if the petals as well as sepals are arranged, it is known as valvate aestivation. Once again, the sepals or petals are arranged in a whorl, that is normally in arrangement is there in a whorl, and in such case if they are just touching one other, they are just touching one another or they may be very close to one another at the margin, there is no overlapping. Without overlapping, if they are touching at the margin, it is known as valvate aestivation. So, once again, sepals or petals in a whorl just touches one another at the margin without overlapping. Why it is mentioned as without overlapping? Because the next one, the twisted aestivation, in this case the margin of the floral appendage, that is sepals and petals, overlap that to the next one. In the previous one valvate, they were not overlapping, they are just touching each other or very close to each other. Here, one sepal or one petal is overlapping over the next one. So, that way every one side of the petal, if that is overlapping on the other side, then it is known as twisted aestivation. In twisted aestivation, the one side of the petal is overlapping on the next petal. So, that arrangement we call it as twisted aestivation. So, the difference between the previous one, that is valvate aestivation and twisted aestivation. In the case of valvate aestivation, no overlapping is there. The petals and sepals are just very close and either they might be touching at the margin. Whereas, in the case of twisted aestivation, one petal is overlapping on the other petal. That is happening only at one end, that is to the next one. So, this way if that is arranged, then that arrangement is known as twisted aestivation. Next, the third one, imbricate aestivation. In imbricate aestivation, actually the margin of sepals and petals are overlapping. What we have seen in twisted aestivation, the same way they are overlapping. But in twisted, it was arranged in a synchronic way, that is one side is overlapping on each to the next one. So, that arrangement is known as twisted. Here, that it is not arranged in any direction, that is overlapping is there for sepals and petals, but one will be fully overlapped, one will be fully out. So, there is no particular random arrangement of the sepals and petals, that is everything, every petal and sepal are overlapped, but not in any particular direction. Then that arrangement of the petal or sepal when takes place, it is known as imbricated aestivation. Next, vexillary, this is the last one, vexillary aestivation. This is a special type of aestivation for some of the flowers, especially the flowers present in Papilionaceous family. Papilionaceous family means leguminous plants. Pea plant, pea flower is the best example for vexillary aestivation. How is this taking place? In this case, normally almost all flowers, normally 5 petals will be there. Here also 5 petals will be there, but petals, they are different size and the arrangement is also in a different manner. This must be having one large petal. Okay, one large petal, then 2 lateral petals, which we generally call as wings. And inner to that, there are 2 small anterior petals. That means inner part of the flower only will be having these 2 petals and they are fused and they are having the shape of a keel. So, even though 5 petals are present, it must be having one large petal, then 2 petals which are smaller than that single petal, which are known as lateral petals or wing petal, and innermost part must be having again 2 petals, but they are fused together to form a keel shaped structure. So, thus it will be having 2 small anterior petals, that is 2, plus again 2 lateral petals, 2 plus 2, plus 1 large petal, which is the standard petal, 2 plus 2 plus 1, total 5 petals in a particular arrangement. The petal size is also different, they are arranged in a different manner. So, this arrangement we call it as vexillary aestivation. This is a special type of aestivation. The examples are the papilionaceous flowers, which are known as leguminous plants. Thus, we have come to an end of aestivation. Different types, 4 types. What are they? Valvate, twisted, imbricate, vexillary. Okay. Next, we have completed the calyx and corolla part. Now, it is the third part. There are 4 floral parts to learn. Which are they? Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium. Should not forget. Okay. So, we have reached the third part, that is androecium, which is the male reproductive organ in a flower, male reproductive part of a flower, which is composed of stamen. That is the quite common term, we all know, stamen. Okay. So, that is androecium. So, androecium means immediately it should come to your mind, the male reproductive organ in a flower composed of stamen. Now, we have to learn about the structure of the stamen. You all must have seen stamen in a plant or in a flower. How is the stamen or what is the structure of the stamen? A stamen is made up of a stalk, attaching part. We call it as filament or stalk, and an anther. So, filaments are for the attachment and anther, which is a bilobed structure. 2 lobes are fused and that is forming this structure. You can see in the picture, there are 2 lobes, bilobed structure. Each lobe formed of 2 chambers. If we take a cross section of that, we can see inside each lobe, there are 2 chambers, which we call it as pollen sacs. Inside these sacs, pollen sac, the pollen grains are present. These pollen grains are the male gamete, male reproductive part, reproductive cell, which is involved for reproduction. So, that is present inside the pollen sac. So, once again its structure, the male reproductive organ, we call it as androecium, composed of stamen. Each stamen means it is made up of 2 parts. A stalk, which is also known as filament, that is for attachment, and an anther structure. Now, this anther is a bilobed structure. Each lobe is formed of 2 chambers. These chambers we call it as the pollen sac. Now, what is present inside the pollen sac? Pollen grains which are present inside the pollen sac, that is the male gamete, male reproductive cell. Let us keep it aside. Now, we have to learn few more things about the stamen. How the stamen is attached, where do we find the stamen? In a flower, the stamen is normally originating like any other floral part, the stamen is also originating from the thalamus. But in some cases, the stamens are attached to a petal. Stamens will be attached to the petal. That is only in certain cases. In such cases, such stamens we call it as epipetalous stamen. So, normally the stamen is originating from the base of the flower, that is from the thalamus. But in some cases, if the stamens are attached to a petal and if the stamens are originating from a petal, such stamen we call it as epipetalous stamen. You can see I have kept so many pictures here how the stamens are attached to the petal. On the petal only the stamens are attached. Such cases we call it as epipetalous stamen. Next is epiphyllous stamen. Epiphyllous stamen means the same way how the epipetalous stamen is present here, the stamens are attached to the perianth. Perianth is a structure present on certain flowers, especially for the lilies, orchids, etc. Calyx and corolla are fused to form perianth. And if the stamens are attached to the perianth, it is not freely attached, and if that is attached with the perianth, such stamen are called as epiphyllous stamen. Okay. So, specialized stamen structures. Normally a stamen is originating from the floral part, from the flower, that is from the thalamus region, whereas if a stamen is attached to the perianth, it is known as epiphyllous. If the stamen is attached to the, to the petal, it is known as epipetalous stamen. So, these are two specialized stamens, that is whenever it is attached to the petal, epipetalous, whenever it is attached to the perianth, it is epiphyllous. Now, the stamens, how it is arranged on a floral bud or in a flower, the arrangement of the stamen. Stamens, in many ways stamen can be freely arranged. Then in some cases the stamens are united to form a bunch or a bundle like hibiscus. Stamens are not free. When you see a lily plant, when you see a rose plant, the stamens are free, whereas in some plants the stamens all are united. They form into a bunch or a bundle. If the stamens are united to form a bunch or a bundle, then the bundle can be of different types. One single bundle with all the stamens attached, monadelphous. Sometimes two bundles. I have just kept a picture, but no two bundles are seen, but they are having two sets of stamens. If two sets of stamen attachment, diadelphous. Many bundles of stamens could be present, then the situation we call it as polyadelphous. So, see, the stamens are united and they form into a bunch. Stamen when it is free, we do not have to specifically mention, but this is a special case or speciality. All the stamens are united and form into a bunch or a bundle. Such case we call it as single bundle, monadelphous. When two set of bundle are forming, then it is known as diadelphous. Then many bundles of stamens could be seen on a plant. Then it is known as on a flower. If many bundles are seen, it is known as polyadelphous. That is all about the stamen. The fourth part, gynoecium, female reproductive part. Male reproductive part Androecium, female reproductive part is Gynoecium. Gynoecium, the female reproductive part is Gynoecium, which is made up of one or more carpel. Let us know what is a carpel. The term carpel is given for the Gynoecium part, female reproductive part, consists of three separate small parts in it, which is ovary, style, stigma. It is marked in the picture. Ovary, style and stigma. Ovary is the enlarged basal part of the female reproductive organ. So, the carpel means it is together ovary, style and stigma together form into the female reproductive organ, and this ovary is the basal part which is enlarged where the female gametes are present inside its ovule or egg. Now, style is an elongated tube is helping for the pollen grains to reach the ovary part. Stigma is the receptive surface for the pollen grains. So, stigma, style and ovary are the three parts present in a female reproductive organ. Together we call it as carpel. Hope you understood what is a carpel. Once again, carpel consists of three parts: basal part, ovary, enlarged portion. Then comes an elongated tubular structure, that is the style. The third part, the receptive surface for pollen grains, slightly sticky part which is known as stigma. Next, based on the carpels, number of carpels, the arrangement of carpels, it is divided, a flower can be divided into two types. That is, a carpel, more than one carpel could be present, sometimes single carpel is present. So, based on the number of carpels and the arrangement of the carpels, the flower can be divided into two types. One is apocarpus, the other one is syncarpus. Now, what is the difference between apocarpus and syncarpus? If more than one carpel is present, instead of one carpel means one ovary, one style, one stigma. Instead of that, many carpels are present in a flower, then we call it as apocarpus, and all the carpels are free also. So, once again, apocarpus flower. What is apocarpus flower? More than one carpel is present, and if the carpels are free, then such a flower we call it as apocarpus. Then what is syncarpus? In the case of syncarpus, here also more than one carpel is present. Okay. But what is the difference between apocarpus and syncarpus? Here all the carpels are fused and they form into a platform. A platform like structure could be seen. So, such a flower in which the carpels are fused, it is known as syncarpus. So, differentiate between apocarpus and syncarpus flower. How will you differentiate? If the carpels are free, many carpels are present, and if the carpels are free, it is known as apocarpus, whereas more than one carpel, many carpels are present, and if the carpels are all fused, it is known as syncarpus. Syncarpus is seen in aquatic plants like water lily, lotus, etc. Apocarpus, majority of the land plants, majority of the plants are having apocarpus or otherwise single carpel structures. Okay. So, syncarpus example is lotus and water lily. So, thus based on the arrangement of the carpel also, there are two types of flowers, apocarpus and syncarpus. Next is the female reproductive organ. We are discussing about the female reproductive organ, and in that carpels with three parts we have learned: ovary, style and stigma. Now, inside the ovary, ovules are present. How is this ovule attached to the ovary? Inside the ovary, inside the ovary, there is a flattened cushion-like structure to which the ovules are attached. So, this flattened cushion-like structure to which the ovules are attached, we call it as placenta. So, what is placenta? The ovules, the female reproductive or female gamete, the ovules are attached to the ovary by a flattened cushion like, or it is attached to a flattened cushion like structure, because ovule is the most delicate tender part. This has to be attached properly. The attachment is on a flattened cushion like structure. This flattened cushion like structure where the ovules are attached, that we call it as placenta. You can see very clearly placenta in which plant? That is capsicum, chili. Chili also, chili it is small, But capsicum, if you take inside the capsicum how the seeds are attached, you just have a look, because we get seeds only after fertilization, but we can very clearly see a cushion like part present to which the seeds are attached. So, seeds before fertilization they were the ovules. Ovules are getting converted into seed normally. So, ovary is converting. So, that part prior to fertilization, how the ovules are attached, exactly the seed formation is taking place there. So, in capsicum we can see the placenta very clearly. So, what is placenta? Once again, flattened cushion like structure where the ovules are attached. This is known as placenta. The clear placenta can be seen in capsicum. Next is arrangement of ovules in the ovary. How the ovules are arranged in an ovary? The arrangement of ovules in an ovary we call it as placentation. So, different ways the ovules are arranged inside the ovary. This arrangement, how the ovules are arranged on a placenta, it is known as placentation. Placentation are of different types: marginal, axile, free central, basal, parietal. That is, the ovules are attached to a cushion like structure which is known as placenta. This ovule attachment to the placenta, we call it as placentation, and this attachment or arrangement of ovules on a placenta are of different types. 5 types are there: marginal, free central, axile, basal, parietal, which we have to study in detail. Marginal placentation. Here the placenta, what is placenta? That is the arrangement of ovules on a cushion like structure. So, this forms a ridge along the ventral suture of the ovary. So, ovary must be having, the outer ovary is having a ventral suture, and the ovules are arranged on the ridge of it. The placenta is forming, the cushion like placenta is forming a ridge along the ventral suture of the ovary. So, the ovules are born on this ridge. This is known as marginal placentation. The marginal placentation example is, that is mainly pea plant. Pea plant, when you see the plant, its ovary is the outer green cover. Inside it, the ovules, prior to fertilization they are ovules, post fertilization, that is converting into seed, what is the pea, what we are getting. So, pea plant, the ovules are arranged on the marginal part as a ventral suture present, and this ventral suture region only the ovules are born. So, what is marginal placentation? The placenta forms a ridge along the ventral suture of the ovary, and the ovules are born on this ridge. Pea plant is the best example for marginal placentation, that is, from one margin all the ovules are originating. Next is the second type, axial placentation. Axial placentation means placenta is axial. Here the ovules are attached to it in a multilocular ovary. Lemon, orange, Mozambique, tomato, lady's finger. Lady's finger is the best example. How comes it will be there? That is, each ovule is present in a separate ovary chamber. The separate chamber formation we call it as multilocular ovary. What do you mean by multilocular ovary? Multilocular ovary means, that is, a chamber is present in the placenta. Each placental region, a septa is formed, and that is divided, and that is forming into chambers. Inside each chamber one ovule is present, which the lady's finger, if you take, how the seeds are present inside the lady's finger, if you have a look, before fertilization the ovule arrangement was exactly how after fertilization the seed formation has taken place. So, seed in the structure, the seed structures, what we could see is normally giving us an idea how the ovules were present in the ovary. So, this way, if the placenta is axial and the ovules are attached to it in a multilocular ovary. Multilocular ovary means chambered, septate ovary. Examples for this type of placentation are lady's finger, lemon, tomato, etc. You can see in the pictures. Tomato picture is there, lemon is also there, as well as lady's finger is given, the multilocular ovary axile placentation, that is the second type of placentation. Third, it is parietal placentation. In parietal placentation, the ovules are developing from the inner wall of the ovary. An outer wall and an inner wall, when it is present, the ovules are present from the inner wall towards the center. That is, from the peripheral part, the ovules are focusing or facing towards inner. There is no septa present in between. So, such an arrangement is known as parietal placentation. So, parietal placentation, the ovules are developing from the inner wall towards the center of the ovary. That is, it is originating from the peripheral part, it is moving towards inside. And there is no septa, there is no chambers, multilocular ovary structures. It is known as which one? Parietal placentation. Examples for parietal placentation are cucumber, papaya, watermelon. All these are examples for which type of placentation? Parietal placentation. So, what is there for the parietal placentation? Ovules are developing on the inner wall of the ovary or the peripheral part, and here when the ovules are developing, they are focusing towards the center. Inner wall or from the peripheral part, the ovules are formed and that is towards the center. There is no septa differentiation, that is, it is free, there is no septa in between. Such a placentation we call it as parietal placentation. Next is free central placentation. What is free central placentation? The term, the title term itself, free central, both the terms. Central region, ovules are born on the central axis, no septa present, they are freely arranged in the center part. So, that arrangement is called as free central. In the center part, all the ovules are formed and there is no septa. If septa is present, it looks like axile placentation. There is a, we can compare this with the, which one? Axile placentation. So, what is axile placentation? I will take the slide. Axile placentation, you see, that is also from the center, but it is in a multilocular chamber, that is, it is present in chambers. Whereas, the second next type, that is free central placentation, ovules are born on the central axis and the septa are absent, then it is known as central placentation. Thus, we have come to an end of the topic flower. Now, a small topic is remaining, that is about the next part, fruit. What is fruit? Fruit is a mature ripened ovary developed after fertilization. So, the flower is the reproductive organ. Male and female reproductive organs are present, which inside it contains male and reproductive cells. This on fusion, the fertilization takes place. After fertilization, what is developing? The ovary. The changes what is happening to ovary is leading for the fruit formation. So, what is a fruit? It is the mature ripened ovary. The changes what is taking place during post fertilization, the changes on the ovary is getting ripening and this development we call it as the fruit. Next, what is the structure of the fruit? Fruits. Many types of fruits, as in the picture what is given: apple, orange, banana, pineapple. Many different types of fruits are present. These fruits, when it is present, let us know the structure of the fruit. It can be, the fruits can be dry or fleshy. If the fruit is fleshy, or let us first discuss about the fleshy fruit. Means it consists of a fruit wall and inside it is containing a seed, or it contains a seed. A fruit means it must be having a fleshy part, inside it must be having a seed. This fleshy part region, which must be having an outer fruit wall also, which we call it as the fleshy part, we can call it as the pericarp. And a seed could be present inside it. The pericarp, when it is fleshy, it is very thick, fleshy, juicy structure. Such fruits we call it as fleshy fruits. The same way, the fruits, when sometimes it seems to be dry fruits, in such case the pericarp will be, that is the fruit wall is very dry. So, fleshy pericarp, if it is present, that is fleshy fruit, and if it is dry, it can be called as dry fruits. All fruits, majority of the fruits contain seeds inside it. And this fleshy pericarp is further differentiated into three regions. The outermost part as epicarp, the fleshy part as mesocarp, and inner hard stony part as endocarp. This detail we can study for different fruits. Generally, the fruit structure, it is consisting a wall which we call it as pericarp, and seeds are present. Pericarp or the fruit wall may be dry or fleshy, and the fleshy pericarp, if it is present, they are differentiated into epicarp, mesocarp and endocarp. In detail we have to study. For that, different types of at least two fruits let us discuss here. One is mango and one is coconut. Why I have chosen these two fruits for studying? Because in both the cases the fruits are developing from monocarpellary. There is no multicarpellary structure. Monocarpellary superior ovary is present and a fruit is developing from monocarpellary. Two fruits I am taking here, one is mango and one is coconut. These fruits, if a fruit is developing from a monocarpellary condition, then such fruits are generally known as drupe, which must be having only one seed. Why it is only one seed? Monocarpellary, inside it, it must be having only one single ovule that is fertilized, and that is getting converted into a seed. The outermost structure, when it is converting the ovary, wall layers are converting into a fruit. So, such fruits in which a fruit is developing from a monocarpellary superior ovary, then such fruits are known as drupe. Drupe example are coconut as well as mango. Why we have chosen these two? There is one important thing you have to see. In the case of mango, we can see the fruit part. We know a fruit means it must be having a fleshy fruit structure, which the fruit walls we call it as pericarp. When I discuss the structure of the fruit, I told you the fruit walls we call it as pericarp, which can be differentiated into three parts: epicarp, mesocarp and endocarp. Together we call it as pericarp. The outer epicarp is the fruit skin in the case of mango. The fleshy edible part of the fruit, what we eat normally, is the mesocarp. Innermost part is the endocarp, which is the just protective cover for the seed. That is in the case of mango. Which part is edible for the mango? The mesocarp is the edible. Outer epicarp is the mango skin. The middle part, that is middle part, which is known as mesocarp, is the edible part, and an endocarp, which is the seed cover. In the case of coconut also, we have pericarp, which is also divided into epicarp, mesocarp and endocarp. Here, what is the epicarp? The coconut, the outer cover, external skin, which is normally green in color, that is the epicarp. Then comes inner part mesocarp, which is the husk of the coconut. Is it edible? In the case of mango, that was the edible part. Here in the case of coconut, that is not edible. That part we call it as mesocarp, which is the husk. Then comes the endocarp, that is the coconut shell. That also is not edible. Here the edible part is present inside the endocarp, that is the white kernel part is the edible part. So, edible part for each fruit is different. We cannot mention or we cannot specify mesocarp is edible. Mesocarp is edible for certain fruits but not for all fruits. Some fruits the epicarp is edible, some fruits endocarp is edible, some fruits mesocarp is edible, but any fruit when you take, it must be having three parts such as outer skin, which is known as epicarp, then a middle part which is known as mesocarp, and a stony inner part which is the endocarp. Together, epicarp, mesocarp and endocarp, we call it as what? Pericarp. That is all about the fruit. Next comes the seed. Inside the fruit, a fertilized ovule part is present, that is the female part after fertilization that is converting into seed. So, what is a seed? It is a fertilized ovule which contains an embryo or a tiny plant with sufficient reserve food for the development of the embryo. So, what is a seed? Seed is after fertilization. The ovule is changing. This changed structure of the ovule, we call it as post fertilization ovule, is the seed. Which what is present inside it? Inside the live part is present. What is the live part called? Embryo. And its nourishment part is also present inside it. Together we call it as seed. So, a seed means inside what is present? Its life containing part embryo, and the embryo for its own growth, it requires some reserve food for the nourishment. All together its structure we call it as the seed. For learning about the seed, first we must know what is embryo, what is present inside the seed. That is embryo. Inside the seed, embryo is present, which is the life. Now, this embryo is further, or it is made up of three parts. A radical part which will extend its growth and form into a root structure, a plumule part which extends its growth upward and form into shoot system, and it's having two or an embryonal axis, that is the attachment. The live part is the embryo which is made up of an embryonal axis in the center, and this on its growth, one part grow downwards which is the radical, one part grow upwards, that is plumule. So, two parts are developing from the embryonal axis, that is the live part, and this is protected by either one or two cotyledons, that is the protective part. So, this is the part which is present inside the seed, that is the life. So, life is present inside the seed, which is we call it as embryo, which is made up of an embryonal axis which extends its growth downward and upward. The growth part which is moving downward, we call it as the radical, which is growing upward, we call it as plumule from the embryonal axis. It is protected by either one or two cotyledons. So, based on the number of cotyledons, the seeds can be divided into two types. They are monocotyledons as well as dicotyledons. The difference between these two are monocotyledons have only one cotyledon and dicotyledonous seeds have two cotyledons. Let us learn about dicot seed as well as monocot seed. Dicot, from the term itself, two cotyledons are present. Now, these two cotyledons are attached and they form into two flap-like structures. They are joining. The joining ridge part must be having a small scar present on it, which we call it as hilum. This is helping for breathing, respiration, exchange of gases, etc. are possible through this small scar-like structure called as hilum. Now, these two cotyledons are fused together and this is protected by a cover. Outermost cover is the seed coat, which is hard and leathery. This hard and leathery outer seed coat, we call it as testa. Inside that there is a thin membranous layer also, which we can call it as tegmen. So, the seed, when it is present, two cotyledons are present. The two cotyledons, when they join, the joining ridge region, there is a small scar formed which is known as hilum, helping for the exchange of gases as well as respiration. Next, it must be having a seed coat outermost cover. The outermost cover is hard and leathery texture, which we call it as tegmen, and the next, the innermost cover there is a thin membrane also present inside, which is the tegmen. So, there are two seed coat, outer testa, inner tegmen. Once again, dicot seed, two cotyledons are present. A small scar is present in between, that is helping for respiration, which we call this point as hilum. Outermost cover is seed coat. This seed coat, the hard outer cover, we call it as testa, and a thin membranous inner layer we call it as tegmen. So, a hard outer layer, distinguishing layer if it is present, that is testa, and inner thin membrane layer we call it as tegmen. In some cases the testa and tegmen are fused together, then we call it only as seed coat. Now, in the dicot plant, how the development of the embryo is taking place. Development of the embryo, which I have already explained the same thing only. Embryo, during its further course of development, it will differentiate into radicle and plumule from the embryonal axis. The radicle is developing into root, plumule is developing into shoot. The cotyledons which are protecting these part are the reserve food carrying part, that is a protective part and which is helping for the embryo to get all nourishment. So, that is the reserve food collecting region. So, that is the development of the embryo, and once the radicle develops into root, the roots further start absorbing water, minerals, etc. from the soil. The plant becomes independent, then reserve food is not required. The plant roots are able to absorb the important nutrients from the soil. Plumule further grow and develop into what? Stem, which bear all the rest of the lateral appendages, which we have discussed in the previous video when we learnt about the stem. Now, one more type of seed is there, monocot seed. The only difference here, single cotyledon, whereas dicot, two cotyledons. Here the seed coat is membranous and fused with the fruit wall. Testa, tegmen is not clearly distinguishable in the case of monocot seeds. Endosperm is present, that is the reserve food material which is bulky and stores food. Endosperm can be separated from the embryo by a proteinaceous layer which we call it as alluron layer. To learn about the alluron layer and structure, please have a look on this slide. You can see endosperm, the rich part of the monocot seed, which is the reserve food material which is helping the growing embryo. So, let us learn about the monocot embryo. Monocot embryo, the embryo is a small part which is situated in lot of groove like structures. These groove like structures are protected by a shield shaped structure which we call it as scutellum. So, the developing embryo in a monocot plant is protected by a shield, that is the monocotyledon part is in the form of a shield shape which is known as scutellum. Inside the scutellum, we can see lot of groove like structures. These groove like structures are the growing embryo. This embryo, the nourishment part for this embryo is by a separate part which we call it as endosperm. It is separated from the embryo by a proteinaceous layer which is alluron layer. Alluron layer is a proteinaceous layer which is separating the endosperm from the embryo. Now, embryo further while on its growth. So, monocot embryo, the embryo is situated in a small groove. This groove structure is protected by a cotyledonous sheath. The cotyledon is of shield shape, and this structure we call it as scutellum. Scutellum is a shield shape. Inside lot of grooves are present, that is the growing embryo region. Its nourishment part is endosperm, which is separated by an layer, a proteinaceous layer which we call it as alluron layer. So, alluron layer is separating the embryonic region from the nourishment region, that is endosperm. Now, embryo on its course of development, what is normally formed? One part is developing into radicle, that is the root system. The other part, plumule, is developing into shoot system. Both plumule and radicle are enclosed in a sheath like structure. A protective sheath is present for both. The protective sheath for plumule is known as coleoptile and protective sheath for root is known as coleorhiza. So, root and shoot are developing from the radicle and plumule, which are again protected by a sheath which are known as coleoptile for the plumule and coleorhiza for the root. So, this way, that is for the radicle. Coleorhiza is for the radicle from which the roots are developing. So, the only difference between monocot seed and dicot seed, dicots, two cotyledons are present and embryonal axis is present in between these two cotyledons, which is developing into radicle and plumule. Whereas here they are enclosed in a sheath like structure which is known as coleoptile and coleorhiza. Coleoptile, when opens, the plumule is developing. Coleorhiza, when opens, it is developing into the radicle, that is the root system. Thus, we have completed the important parts of a plant: root, stem, leaf, flower, fruit, seed. So, all the important parts have been discussed and we are coming to an end for the chapter Morphology of Flowering Plants. So, Morphology of Flowering Plants I have completed in 3 sessions and in this session we have discussed about flower, fruit and seed. Thus, we have come to an end of the session. Hope you all enjoyed the session. I will come back with another session with another topic. Till the time, bye from me. Thank you.